A millionaire CEO took his autistic son to a blind date. Only one poor girl passed the test and won his heart. Before the story begins, please tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story, everyone. Peter Griffin walked toward the entrance of Boston's most upscale restaurant. By his side was Josh, his 9-year-old son, with messy brown hair, big headphones, and a Rubik's Cube spinning non-stop between his fingers. Josh didn't talk much to strangers. Actually, he hardly spoke at all. But when he did, it was direct, precise, and almost always surprising. Peter sighed. "Remember the plan, son? You just need to stick around. If you don't like her, we get up and leave." Josh gave a small nod, without taking his eyes off the cube. "If she lies, I'll notice," he said calmly. Peter almost smiled. That was true. Josh had an incredible skill for spotting patterns in language, behavior, logic. Since he was diagnosed with autism at age 3, therapists called him hyperlogical. In other words, not great for blind dates. They crossed the elegant dining room and were shown to a reserved table at the back. Peter looked around with an almost automatic boredom. He had been on 7 dates in the last 2 months, all arranged by his sister, worried about his lonely life. None of the women lasted 5 minutes with Josh without exchanging looks of pity or panic. Some didn't even try to hide it. 8 minutes, Josh muttered, spinning the cube. "What?" Peter raised an eyebrow. That's how long they lasted on average before lying, pretending, or wanting to leave. Peter let out a small chuckle through his nose. Maybe they'll break the record today. But before he could finish the sentence, the restaurant door burst open abruptly. Mary Collins appeared amid the fancy setting, like a tornado in a porcelain garden. She carried a bag too big for the occasion, wore a yellow short-sleeved shirt with pineapple prints, definitely casual, and her hair was tied in a messy bun held with a pencil. "Oops, sorry," she said, stumbling on her shoelace and dropping the menu from the next table. The waiter tried to help, but she smiled, picked up the papers, and said loudly, "Relax, champ. It's not the first time I cause a scene, and it won't be the last." Some guests frowned. Others tried to pretend they didn't see. Peter just stared, frozen. But Josh? Josh stopped spinning the Rubik's Cube. Mary walked up to their table like she hadn't just knocked over half the restaurant. When she got there, she looked at Josh first. She smiled, crouched to his level, and said, "Hi, you must be the judge tonight, right? You look like you're the boss more than you seem." Josh stared at her for 3 seconds. "What is the value of pi squared?" he asked. Peter choked on his water. Mary blinked. "That depends. Do you want the exact answer or an approximation? Because if it's an approximation, I'd guess 9.869. But if you want all the digits, give me about 20 minutes and a calculator." Josh smiled. Peter was speechless. Mary straightened up and looked at Peter as if nothing had happened. "You must be the Peter. Sorry I'm late. Half the subway stopped because of a brave pigeon. And yes, I took the subway because my car is called My Feet, and they're still on installments." Peter blinked. "You're different. I've heard that before. But I promise I don't bite, unless the bread roll is really good." She grabbed one from the basket and bit into it without ceremony. Josh was spinning the cube faster now. His eyes, once behind an invisible wall, were fixed on her. "You're honest," he said plainly. "I am. But if you tell me a secret, I promise to keep it and pretend I never heard it." Josh leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Mary's eyes widened. Then she smiled. "I loved that secret. It's the best one I've been told today. Peter tried to understand what was happening. He, used to controlling everything, from stock trades to business mergers, now felt off balance, like he was inside one of those romantic movies his sister insisted on watching on Friday nights. Except, in this case, the script was impossible to predict. "Can I order fries?" Mary asked, still holding the menu closed. Peter hesitated. "That's not exactly on the menu." "Perfect. I love to challenge menus." She winked. Peter leaned back in his chair. Josh stopped spinning the cube. Mary chatted with the waiter like she'd known him for years. She joked about the complicated names of the dishes and asked if she could take a look at the kitchen later. When the waiter said no, she replied, "Okay, fine, but only because I'm wearing heels today." Josh laughed, a light, short, but genuine laugh. Peter slowly turned to his son, surprised. "You laughed?" Josh nodded. "She's not afraid of me. And she doesn't feel sorry. She just talks." Peter looked at Mary. She was now trying to balance a spoon on the tip of her nose. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't what he wanted. But strangely, it was exactly what he needed. Dinner went in a way Peter never imagined possible. Mary didn't ask about his company, didn't mention his fortune, and for the love of everything sacred, didn't say anything like, "It must be hard raising a child alone." Instead, she ate with appetite, joked about the restaurant's overly golden decor, and treated Peter like he was a normal person. "Seriously, who decided 15 different forks was a good idea?" she said, holding up one of the smaller utensils. "Like, what happens if I use the salad fork to eat dessert? Does the utensil police come after me?" Peter tried to keep his composure, but the corners of his mouth kept turning up. "Technically, it's a matter of social etiquette." "Oh, I get it." Mary took the dessert fork and cut a piece of salad. "There. Now I'm a culinary rebel. Josh, you're my witness." Josh watched everything with an intensity Peter recognized. It was the same look the boy had when solving a particularly difficult Rubik's Cube. Focused, analytical, but interested. "Mary," Josh said suddenly, stopping her from playing with the forks. "Why does electricity make noise when it goes through wires?" Peter almost choked. Josh never asked casual questions to strangers. Actually, Josh almost never asked questions to anyone except to him. Mary showed no surprise, or that forced smile most adults give when kids ask something cute. Instead, she rested her chin on her hand and thought about the question seriously. "Well, technically, electricity itself doesn't make noise. What you hear is the air around the wires heating up and expanding quickly. It's like when you pop popcorn in the microwave. The heat makes the kernels jump and make noise." Josh tilted his head. "But what about when wires make that buzzing sound?" "Oh, that one's different." Mary got excited, waving the dessert fork. "That happens because alternating current makes the wires vibrate 50 or 60 times per second. It's like a really, really boring electric guitar." Peter stared at her, fascinated. Not just because the answer was correct, he knew that, but because of how she explained it. No condescension, no oversimplifying, but also no jargon Josh wouldn't understand. "Did you study engineering?" Peter asked. Mary shrugged, as if it wasn't a big deal. "I studied a little bit of everything. I'm the kind of person who reads microwave manuals for fun." She turned to Josh again. "Want to hear something cool? If you put a Rubik's Cube near a speaker playing music, the sound vibrations can slightly affect how the pieces move. Like a dancing Rubik's Cube." Josh's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Totally. Of course, you need very, very sharp ears to notice the difference. But it happens." Josh took the cube out of his pocket immediately and started spinning it near his ear, paying close attention to the almost unnoticeable sounds the pieces made as they moved. Peter watched the scene with something like amazement. His ex-wife, Sarah, had been wonderful with Josh, but even she needed time to get used to the boy's quirks. Most people felt uncomfortable with Josh's direct questions, or tried to answer vaguely to not confuse the child. Mary, on the other hand, seemed genuinely interested. Talking to a 9-year-old about physics was the most natural thing in the world. "Josh," Peter said gently, "finish eating before your food gets cold." "He's fine," Mary interrupted. "Let him explore. Food heats up again, but curiosity, that's rare." And that was the moment Peter noticed something that made him deeply uneasy. Mary wasn't trying to impress him through Josh. She was genuinely talking to the boy. The difference was subtle, but for someone who had spent the last 2 years being bombarded by women pretending to be interested in his son to impress the father, the difference was striking. Dinner continued at this pace. Mary told hilarious stories about previous jobs, from being a clerk at a hardware store where she had to explain to a customer that screws don't have gender, to working at a diner where the owner insisted she memorize 50 different burger sauces. And the guy was all like, No, it's not special sauce number 7. It's special sauce number 7. Mary imitated a deep, dramatic voice. Like the fate of humanity depended on me memorizing the difference between honey mustard and artisan honey mustard. Josh laughed again. Peter noticed the sound was becoming less rare, less hesitant. When dessert arrived, an overly fancy tiramisu that probably cost more than Mary made in a day, she looked at it with skepticism. "This looks more like a sculpture than food. I'm afraid to touch it and break something important." "You can eat it," Peter assured her. "It's just tiramisu." "Just tiramisu," he says. Mary shook her head toward Josh. "Your dad's a bit out of touch with reality, isn't he?" Josh thought about it seriously. "Sometimes, but he tries." Peter didn't know if he should be offended or touched by their brutal honesty. Mary took a big spoonful of dessert and made an exaggerated, dramatic face. "Okay, I admit it. This is officially the best thing I've ever eaten in my life." She leaned toward Josh as if to share a secret. "But don't tell my corner bakery bread roll. He gets jealous." When it was finally time to leave, Peter expected the usual ritual, exchanging numbers, the "we should see each other again" suggestion, the hopeful smile that meant she was waiting for him to make the first move. Instead, Mary stood up, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and said, "Well, it was nice meeting you both. Josh, keep being curious. Peter?" She hesitated for a moment, like she was going to say something important, then smiled. "Thanks for dinner. It was way better than I expected, considering I wasn't expecting much at all, and just left." Peter stood still, watching her walk toward the door with the same messy energy she had when she arrived. She stopped to thank the waiter, joked with the doorman, and disappeared into the busy Boston street. Something strange happened in Peter's chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in so long he almost forgot how to recognize it. Genuine curiosity. Not the kind of curiosity he felt about financial reports or market strategies. It was something more. "Human," Dad Josh said, still spinning the Rubik's Cube. "Yes?" "She didn't try to impress you." Peter turned to look at his son. "What do you mean?" Josh looked at him with those eyes that saw patterns where others saw only chaos. All the others always did things to make you think they were important, asked about money, or said I was special in a weird way, or tried to seem smarter than they really were. He stopped spinning the cube. She just listened and talked like we were normal. On the way home, in the quiet of the luxury car that kept them separate from the outside world, Peter couldn't get Mary out of his mind. There was something about her that challenged all his expectations. She didn't fit into any category he knew. Not as fancy as the women in his social circle, but also not as easily impressed as he had imagined. She was smart without being pretentious, funny without trying too hard, honest without being harsh. And for the first time in a long time, Peter Griffin, a man who controlled business empires and moved millions with a phone call, found himself completely out of control. That night, lying in the king-size bed of his apartment overlooking Boston Harbor, Peter stayed awake, not because of work stress or money worries, but because of a woman who used the wrong fork and made his son laugh. And that bothered him, in the best way possible. Peter Griffin wasn't the kind of man who showed up at cafes on Saturday mornings. Actually, Peter Griffin didn't even know where cafes were. His morning routine was coffee made by the housekeeper, the Wall Street Journal perfectly folded, and an agenda his secretary organized with military precision. But there he was, standing in front of Beans and Dreams, a small, cozy cafe in Boston's North End, hands in his pockets, with an expression swinging between determination and total panic. Josh was with Aunt Catherine for a special Rubik's Cube session with other kids on the autism spectrum, something Peter usually supervised personally. But that morning, he lied, said he had an urgent meeting, and left his son and his sister's care. The truth? He had spent 3 days thinking about Mary Collins, and that was unacceptable. Peter opened the cafe door, making an old-fashioned bell ring. The place was the complete opposite of anywhere he usually went. Exposed brick walls, a mix of mismatched chairs, local artists' paintings hung with little order, and a coffee smell that seemed to have a personality of its own. And there she was. Mary wore a green apron over a t-shirt that said caffeine, because sleeping is for the weak, and had her hair tied in a ponytail that defied any kind of structural logic. She was behind the counter, patiently explaining to an elderly lady the difference between a cappuccino and a macchiato, using gestures that looked more like a wild dance routine. And a macchiato is like a cappuccino that went to the gym and got stronger, she said, playfully flexing her arms. The lady laughed and chose the cappuccino. That's when Mary looked toward the door and saw Peter. For a fraction of a second, her eyes widened with genuine surprise. Then, as if you could see the gears turning in her mind, her expression changed to something between amusement and teasing. She finished helping the lady, handed over the coffee with a warm smile, and then turned to Peter with a completely neutral look. "Can I help you?" she asked, as if she had never seen him before. Peter blinked. "Mary? It's me, Peter, from dinner on Thursday." She pretended to think, tapping her fingers on the counter. Peter, I don't remember. Are you a regular customer? Because I swear I'd remember someone who looks like he stepped right out of a business magazine." He stood there, unsure if she was serious or not. Mary kept up a straight face for exactly 5 seconds before bursting out laughing. "Relax, Mr. Serious. I'm just kidding." She leaned on the counter with a mischievous smile. "But speaking of which, what are you doing here? Want some coffee? Or just here to ruin my shift?" Peter felt something he rarely experienced. He was being teased, and strangely, he liked it. "I wanted coffee," he lied shamelessly. "Liar," Mary said, without missing a beat. "You look like the kind of guy who drinks coffee that costs more than my week's salary and comes in cups that need instruction manuals." She gestured to the handwritten menu on the board behind her. "Here we have strong coffee, stronger coffee, and coffee that will make you see the future. Which one will it be?" Peter looked at the menu and realized he really had no idea how to order coffee in a normal place. What do you recommend?" "Depends. Do you know how to order food by yourself? Or do you need to call your secretary? The tease hit the mark. Peter felt his cheeks warm a little. I can order food by myself, thank you. Prove it. Mary crossed her arms, clearly enjoying herself. Order something from the menu without using words like I would like. Would it be possible? Or if it's not too much trouble? Peter looked at her. It had been years since anyone challenged him like that. Years since anyone treated Peter Griffin like anyone else. Someone who could be teased, tested, played with. Strong coffee, he said, trying to sound casual. And that thing there, he pointed to a blueberry muffin in the display case. That thing? Mary pretended to be shocked. Sir, that's an artisanal blueberry muffin with crystal sugar topping and vanilla essence. It has a first and last name. Okay. Peter laughed without meaning to. The artisanal blueberry muffin with crystal sugar topping and vanilla essence. Better. Mary turned to make the coffee. At least now you treated the muffin with the respect it deserves. While she worked, Peter watched her movements. There was something hypnotic about the way Mary moved through the small space behind the counter. Efficient, but relaxed. She greeted every customer by name, knew their preferences, and made jokes that brought out genuine smiles. Have you worked here long? Peter asked, taking the steaming cup. Weekends for about 2 years. Mary leaned on the counter again. During the week, I work at an accounting firm. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. And here, she gestured around the cafe. It's kind of my therapy. I like people, most of them, at least. Peter tasted the coffee and had to admit it was delicious. Strong, full-bodied, with a flavor that really had personality. This is good, he said, genuinely surprised. Of course it is. I made it, Mary winked. You look shocked. What did you expect? Dirty water? No, it's just... Peter stopped, realizing anything he said would sound condescending. Oh, I get it, Mary said, shaking her head with an ironic smile. You're surprised that a regular person like me actually knows how to make real coffee, not just some toot waitress serving bad drinks with a fake smile. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. But Mary didn't seem offended, just amused. Relax, Peter. I'm not fragile. And you're not the first rich guy to show up here thinking he found a hidden gem among regular folks. Peter felt like he'd been slapped in the face, a needed slap. You're right, he admitted. That's exactly what I thought, and it was dumb of me. Mary blinked, clearly not expecting such honesty. Huh. Okay. Points for owning up instead of making excuses. They were silent for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like they were rethinking each other. So why did you really come here? Mary finally asked. Peter hesitated. The truth was, he didn't have a rational answer. He'd spent 3 days trying to get Mary out of his head, and failed miserably. He thought about how she made Josh laugh, how she didn't try to impress him, how she treated them both like normal people. I don't know, he said honestly. I guess I wanted to understand you better. Understand what? Mary tilted her head. I'm not that complicated. Work, pay bills, watch bad shows on Netflix, eat cold pizza for breakfast. Mystery solved. Peter smiled. Can I give you a ride home when your shift ends? I can take the subway. Thanks. I know you can. But can I still give you a ride? Mary studied him for a long moment. Why? Because I'd like to talk more with you. About what? About anything. Peter was surprised at his own sincerity. About how you know so much physics, why you work 2 jobs, why you didn't try to impress me at dinner. About everything. Mary bit her lower lip, thinking. My shift ends in an hour. I'll wait. You'll stay here, drinking coffee and staring at me like a well-dressed stalker? If you let me. Mary laughed. Okay, but you'll have to put up with me working. And fair warning, I'm way funnier with the other customers than with you." Peter settled at a small table in the corner and spent the next hour watching Mary at work. She hadn't lied. She was funny, warm, and natural with everyone. But Peter noticed something more. She really cared about people. She remembered names, asked about kids and pets, listened to work complaints with genuine patience. When her shift finally ended, Mary stepped out from behind the counter, the zap taking off her apron. "All right, Mr. Patience, let's go." In the car, a discreet BMW Peter had chosen instead of a limousine, Mary gave directions to a neighborhood Peter had never visited. Narrower streets, older buildings, life happening on the sidewalks. "Here," she said when they arrived in front of a 3-story apartment building. Peter looked up. The building was old but well kept. There were flower pots on the windowsills, clotheslines stretching between buildings, and sounds of life coming through open windows. "Thanks for the ride," Mary said, already with her hand on the door handle. "Mary," Peter called before she left. "Yes. Can I see you again?" Mary smiled, and this time there was no teasing. Just something soft and genuine. "You know where to find me on weekends." She got out of the car and walked toward the building door. Peter watched her climb the steps and wave before disappearing inside. He stood there for a few minutes looking at the building. Through the open windows, he could see small glimpses of life. A family having dinner, a woman watering plants, children playing. It was simple, real, completely different from the glass and steel world Peter lived in. And for the first time in years, he wondered if maybe there was something valuable in that simplicity. Peter stared at the phone on his desk for 15 minutes before finally dialing the number. He'd gotten Mary's number through the cafe, a casual conversation with the manager about a customer who left something behind on Saturday. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Hello, Mary, it's Peter." A pause. Then, in that playful tone, he was starting to associate with her. "Peter Griffin, billionaire CEO, is calling me. Wow, I must be in trouble. What's up? Did I forget to pay for the coffee?" Peter chuckled without meaning to. "Actually, I wanted to invite you. Josh has a science fair tomorrow night. We would like you to come. Josh specifically asked me to come." "Well," Peter hesitated. "He asked if you'd come, and when I said I wasn't sure, he said I should ask." "Oh, I see. So it was Josh's idea. It was mine too." Peter quickly added, "I'd like you to come." There was a silence on the other end, and Peter wondered if he'd been too direct. "What time?" Mary finally asked. 7 o'clock. I can come pick you up." "No need. I'll figure out how to get there." "What's the address?" Peter gave her the address of Brookline Academy, trying not to let relief show in his voice. "Mary?" "Yes. Thank you for saying yes. Don't thank me yet. You don't know how I behave at school events. I could be a total mess." The next evening, the gym at Brookline Academy had been transformed into a science fair. Colorful projects filled tables arranged in neat rows, each accompanied by a proud and nervous child, ready to explain months of hard work. Peter arrived early with Josh, who carefully carried a box holding his project, a complex system of modified Rubik's cubes he had developed to create logical patterns. "Is she really coming?" Josh asked for the 3rd time as they set up their display. "She said yes," Peter replied, checking his watch. "Good. I want her to see what I made." Peter watched his son arrange every part of the project meticulously. Josh rarely showed any anxiety about impressing someone, but today was different. There was a hopeful energy in him. Peter recognized well, the same energy Peter himself felt when Mary was around. At 7:15, Peter spotted Mary walking through the gym. She wore a navy skirt and a simple white blouse, but there was something about the way she moved, confident, curious, genuinely interested in what she saw that made her stand out. "Mary," Josh waved enthusiastically. She approached with a bright smile and a paper bag in her hands. "Josh, you look so sharp." She crouched down to his level. "And this must be the mysterious project you've been working on." Josh practically beamed with pride. "It's a combinational logic system using Rubik's cubes as the interface. Want to see how it works?" "I really do." Peter watched Mary lean over the project with genuine attention. Her questions were smart and specific. She truly understood what Josh had created. "So you developed a way to program patterns using color combinations?" she asked, examining the modified tubes. "Exactly. Each sequence represents a different command. It's like binary code, but with 6 variables instead of 2. "Josh, that's brilliant," Mary said, and Peter could tell she wasn't just being polite. "You created a completely new programming language." The event flowed naturally. Mary moved through the gym as if she belonged, chatting with other kids about baking soda volcanoes and solar system models. With the parents, she was just as comfortable, neither intimidated by the obvious money some had, nor trying to impress anyone. Peter watched her interact with Margaret Whitmore, wife of a well-known senator, and noticed how Mary managed to be respectful without being submissive, interested without being fake. "Your son is exceptional," Margaret told Peter as Mary stepped away to help a little girl with her project about carnivorous plants. "And Mary is refreshing." Peter nodded, watching Mary turn a project about carnivorous plants into a hilarious presentation that drew both kids and adults. "Plants are basically vegetable detectives," Mary explained with theatrical seriousness. "They set traps, wait patiently, and then, surprise, dinner served." The little girl laughed, the adults smiled, and the project became one of the fair's most popular attractions. As the crowd began to thin, and Josh was busy explaining technical details to a group of impressed teachers, Peter and Mary found themselves relatively alone near the gym's bleachers. "Josh is a total hit," Mary said, watching his animated gestures. "He was born for this." "He likes you," Peter said. "And that isn't common." Mary turned to face him. "Why do you talk like Josh is hard to like? He's an amazing kid who sees the world in a unique way. That should be celebrated." Peter hesitated. There was something about Mary's frankness that made him want to be equally honest. Most people don't get that. They think Josh is a challenge, or feel sorry for him, or think you're a hero for raising him alone. Mary finished with irony. "How did you know?" "Because I've been on the other side of that equation." Peter frowned, confused. Mary was quiet for a moment, watching the soft gym lights reflect off the empty bleachers. "I was an engineering student at MIT, she said finally, her voice softer than usual. "Second year, full scholarship, top grades. I had a research internship in medical robotics and big plans to revolutionize prosthetics for kids." Peter stared at her, taking it all in. "What happened?" "My mom got sick, early onset Alzheimer's." Mary gave a sad smile. "My dad died when I was 16, so it was just the 2 of us. At first, it was little forgettings, teas, neighbors' names. But then, she started getting lost, leaving the stove on, not recognizing me some mornings." Peter felt his heart tighten. "I tried to balance school and caregiving, but Mary shook her head. She needed constant care, and I couldn't afford to pay for help. So I gave it all up. School, internship, boyfriend, dreams, everything. For how long? 4 years. Until she passed." Mary looked at her hands. "When it ended, I was 26. No degree, no work experience, nothing. 4 years behind in a field that changes every 6 months. Peter looked at Mary like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not just the funny woman who teased him, but someone who had given up everything for family. You never thought about going back? Every day, Mary said. But going back meant starting over, and starting over meant not having money to live while studying. It's a dead end. Mary. Peter stepped closer without thinking. No, she cut him off, sensing the pity in his tone. I don't want your sympathy. I did what I had to do. I don't regret it. I just sometimes wonder who I'd be if I'd had a choice. Peter looked at her, seeing layers of strength and vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. You're extraordinary, he said, the words slipping out without thought. Mary looked surprised. I'm not. Yes, you are. You gave up your dreams for your mother. You see Josh for who he really is. You treat people like people, not like social status. You are. Peter leaned in to kiss her. Mary put her hand on his chest, stopping him gently. Peter. No. Why? Mary studied him with eyes that seemed to see through masks. Because you're used to people accepting whatever you offer, whenever and however you offer it. Her voice was kind but firm. I'm not like that. If this is going to happen, it'll be when we both know exactly what we're doing. Peter stepped back, respecting her space. You're right. I usually am, Mary said with a small smile. When they went to pick up Josh, they found him carefully putting away his project, a shining first-place medal around his neck. Mary, I won. Josh ran to her, beaming. Of course you did. You're a genius. In the parking lot, Josh came up to Mary, holding something. I made this for you, he said, handing her a modified Rubik's Cube with a folded note taped to one side. Mary unfolded the note and read aloud, You are different. That's good. She looked at Josh, her eyes shining. Josh, this is the most special gift I've ever received. Josh smiled, one of those rare smiles that lit up his whole face. When you solve it, you'll understand why you're important to us. Mary hugged Josh quickly, tucking the cube away like it was precious. Peter watched them, feeling something change deep inside. For the first time, he questioned if controlling everything was really as important as he thought. The Monday after the science fair, Mary was organizing returned books at the Boston Public Library when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Excuse me, could you tell me where the cooking section is? Mary turned slowly, finding Peter Griffin standing between the shelves with an expression trying to look casual, but failing miserably. Let me guess, she said, putting a hand on her hip. You woke up today with an unexplained urge to learn how to cook, and by pure coincidence, you picked the exact library where I work during the week? Peter blushed slightly. I really need to learn to cook. Josh is tired of takeout. Uh-huh. Mary wasn't buying it, but there was something funny about his awkward attempt. And you couldn't just buy a cookbook at a bookstore because... Peter hesitated, realizing he'd been caught. Because I wanted to see you. The honesty completely disarmed Mary. She expected him to make up more excuses, not admit it so directly. Well, at least you're honest when cornered, she said, pointing in a direction. The cooking section is over there. Beginner books are on the bottom shelf. Peter followed her, but instead of grabbing a book, he just watched Mary work. She organized, stamped, helped people find what they needed, all with a natural efficiency he found almost hypnotic. Aren't you going to pick a book? Mary asked without looking at him. I'm weighing my options. You're staring at me. There's a difference. Peter chuckled softly. There was something freeing about being called out so bluntly by someone who wasn't afraid of him. On Wednesday, Peter showed up at the cafe during Mary's shift, using some excuse about being in the neighborhood for a meeting. "What meeting?" Mary asked, making his coffee before he even ordered. "An important meeting." "With who?" "With important people." Mary stopped stirring the coffee and looked at him. "Peter Griffin, you're a terrible liar." "I know," he admitted, accepting defeat. "I just wanted to see you again. You could have just said that, instead of making up fake meetings. I'll say it next time." "There will be a next time?" Peter looked at her for a moment. "Hope so." On Friday, Peter showed up at the market where Mary was shopping. This time, he didn't even try to make up an excuse. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," Mary replied, trying to hide a smile. "Following my routine now?" "Maybe a little. That's kind of stalkerish, you know." "I know. Want me to stop?" Mary considered the question while picking tomatoes. "No," she said finally. "But next time, come before the veggies. I always spend more time picking fruit." Just then, Josh appeared from behind a cereal stack. "Mary?" He ran to her. "Dad said you were here." Mary looked at Peter, raising an eyebrow. "You brought back up?" "Actually," Josh said, ignoring the tease, "I wanted to invite you." "Invite me to what?" "My class is having a school retreat this weekend. It's at Walden Lake, and parents can come too. Would you like to come with us?" Mary blinked, surprised. "Josh, that's very kind of you, but it's a family event." "Your family," Josh said, with his usual straightforwardness. "Not official yet, but you are." Peter caught his breath. "Josh?" "It's true," the boy insisted. "You like her. She likes you, and she likes me. That's all the ingredients needed to make a real family." Mary looked between father and son, clearly touched by Josh's innocent logic. "Are you sure you want me there?" "I am," Josh said, "and Dad is too, even if he's too nervous to admit it." Peter sighed. "He's not wrong," Mary smiled. A different smile. Softer and more vulnerable than any Peter had seen before. "All right, I'll go." Walden Lake in the fall was like a postcard. Trees dressed in red and gold reflected in the calm water, and the air had that fresh quality that makes people want to take deeper breaths. The retreat was held at an old wooden lodge with cabins spread around the property. The kids took part in activities during the day, while the parents could relax or join optional workshops. Peter had booked 2 cabins, one for him and Josh, and another for Mary. But Josh, with his sharp logic, immediately questioned the plan. "Why 2 cabins? Mary could stay with us. There are 2 bedrooms." Because Peter searched for a good explanation for a 9-year-old. "Because it's polite." "Polite to who?" Josh asked. "You slept on our couch when your sister visited last week. What's the difference?" Mary laughed at the conversation, clearly enjoying Peter's discomfort. "Josh has a point," she said, "but I'm going to stay in my cabin anyway. I like having my own space." During the day, they joined the activities with the other families. Mary fit in naturally, helping with games, joining the trail hike, and making the kids laugh during lunch by the lake. Peter watched her interact with everyone, kids, parents, organizers, and noticed how she had a gift for making people feel comfortable. It wasn't forced or calculated. It was just who she was. At night, after Josh had fallen asleep exhausted from the day's activities, Peter found Mary sitting alone by the campfire the organizers had lit in the center of the camp. Most of the other families had already gone to their cabins. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Sure." Peter sat in one of the wooden chairs beside her. The fire crackled softly, sending occasional sparks into the starry sky. "Thanks for coming," he said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "Thanks for inviting me." "Well, for Josh inviting me. It was my idea too," Peter said quickly. "I just didn't know how to ask." Mary turned to face him. "Why is it so hard for you to say what you want?" The question caught Peter off guard. He thought of several answers about responsibility, being a CEO, taking care of Josh, but they all sounded like excuses. "Because," he paused, trying to find the right words, "because it's been a long time since I've wanted something that wasn't about work or taking care of Josh, and I don't know how to handle that." "Handle what exactly?" Peter looked at her. The firelight danced across her face, casting soft shadows that made her look even more beautiful. "You," he finally said. "I don't know how to deal with what I feel for you." Mary stayed quiet for a moment. "And what do you feel?" Peter opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. There was so much he wanted to say about how she made Josh smile, how she treated him like a regular person, how he thought of her every morning when he woke up, but the words got stuck in his throat. He tried again, but stopped. Mary watched him struggle for a few seconds, then stood up. Peter thought she was leaving, but instead, she came closer and knelt beside his chair. "You think too much," she said softly, and then she kissed him. It wasn't a dramatic or passionate kiss like in the movies. It was calm, intentional, gentle, as if she were saying everything he couldn't put into words. When they pulled apart, Peter looked at her with surprise and something like relief. "I figured you needed a little push," Mary said with a small smile. Peter started to laugh, not a polite, controlled laugh, but something real and freeing, coming from a place he'd forgotten existed. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since you showed up at the library pretending you wanted to learn how to cook." "I do want to learn how to cook." "I know." "That's one of the things I like about you," Peter smiled, feeling like a weight he'd carried for years had suddenly lifted. "Mary? Yeah? Thanks for the push." She kissed his forehead lightly, then sat back down in her chair. "Anytime you need it." They stayed there until the fire burned down to embers, talking about everything and nothing. And Peter realized that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about the future or worrying about the past. He was just present, right there, with her, and that was more than enough. The Monday after their weekend at Lake Walden, Peter was determined to make Mary a more official part of his life. That kiss by the fire had shifted something deep between them, and he wanted her to see his world beyond casual meetings at coffee shops and libraries. The first step was a charity event at the Four Seasons. Peter had purchased a table for 10 and invited Mary to join him. "It's a dinner to raise money for special education," he explained over the phone. "I thought you'd like the cause." Mary hesitated. "Peter, that kind of event. It's really not my scene. It'll be fun," he insisted. "And you'll like the people. They're all involved in important causes." On Saturday night, when Peter arrived to pick her up, Mary was wearing a simple black dress she'd bought just for the occasion. She looked stunning, but Peter noticed something different about the way she moved. She seemed less relaxed, more self-conscious. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you. And thanks for lending me the shoes," she said, referring to the black pumps Peter had sent over, with a note saying they were a gift, not a loan. The Four Seasons ballroom was exactly what Mary had feared. Grand, formal, and full of people who looked like they'd been born wearing tuxedos and evening gowns. Guests strolled around with champagne glasses, talking quietly about investments, summer homes in Martha's Vineyard, and even more exclusive social events. Peter greeted acquaintances, introducing Mary as a special friend. She smiled, shook hands, and and tried to join the conversations. But Peter could sense her tension growing with each interaction. "Mary works at the public library," Peter would say, trying to include her. "How interesting," came the usual reply in that tone that meant the opposite. "It must be. Rewarding to work with books." The conversations followed predictable patterns. Working in libraries was considered noble, but soon the topic would shift to things Mary couldn't keep up with. Investment funds, internal corporate politics, gossip about people she didn't know. During dinner, Mary found herself seated between Catherine Montgomery, a senior partner at the law firm that represented Griffin Enterprises, and Robert Ashford, the owner of a luxury hotel chain. "So Mary," Catherine said, as she delicately cut her grilled salmon, "how did you and Peter meet?" "A blind date," Mary answered honestly, set up by his sister. "How romantic," Catherine said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And where do you work again?" "At the Boston Public Library. And I work at a cafe on weekends." "2 jobs," Robert commented. "That must be challenging." There was something in his tone that made Mary feel like a specimen under a microscope. She realized that people weren't really interested in her answers. They were categorizing her, judging her, figuring out where she belonged in their social hierarchy. Peter tried to include her, steering the conversation toward topics where Mary could contribute. But it was like trying to force a puzzle piece into the wrong place. It just didn't fit. "Mary knows a lot about engineering," Peter said at one point, when the conversation turned to technology. "How interesting," said Catherine. "Did you study engineering?" "I started at MIT, but I didn't finish," Mary replied. "Oh." Catherine's interest vanished instantly. "I see." It was during dessert that Mary overheard the comment that changed everything. She had gotten up to go to the restroom and passed by the table where Catherine was speaking with 2 other women. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Peter's name caught her attention. "Peter has always had a thing for charity projects," Catherine was saying. "First, that school for special needs children. Now he shows up with a librarian. At least this time, he's not mixing his personal life with philanthropy, quite so obviously." "She seems sweet," said one of the other women. "Oh, I'm sure she is." Catherine's tone was condescending. "It's just that, well, Peter needs to think about what's best for Josh, too. That child needs stability, not social experiments." Mary felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Social experiment. Charity project. The words echoed in her mind as she returned to the table. When Peter asked if she was okay, Mary mumbled something about a headache. When he offered to leave early, she shook her head and said he should stay. After all, it was important for him to be there. But when dessert was served, Mary stood up. "I need to go," she said quietly to Peter. "Now? But we haven't even—" "I need to go," she re-picking up her purse. "You stay. This is important for you." Peter stood up, confused. "Mary, what happened?" "Nothing. I just need to go home." And she walked out, leaving Peter standing in the middle of the ballroom, not understanding what had just happened. In the days that followed, Mary didn't answer Peter's calls. When he stopped by the cafe on Saturday, the manager told him she had switched shifts. At the library, the front desk clerk said Mary was busy with a special project and couldn't take visitors. Peter felt lost. The lake retreat had been perfect, natural, spontaneous, real. But the moment he tried to include Mary in his official world, everything fell apart. Josh noticed right away that his father's mood had changed. "Where's Mary?" he asked on Wednesday during dinner. "She's busy," Peter said, stirring his food distractedly. "Did you guys fight?" "Not exactly." Josh gave him that sharp, observant look. "Did you do something stupid?" "Maybe," Peter admitted, I don't know what I did, but apparently I did something. Did you ask her? She doesn't want to talk to me. Josh thought about that for a moment. Then maybe you need to try harder. On Thursday night, Peter was in the kitchen looking at a delivery menu when he had a sudden realization. Instead of ordering expensive sushi, he went out, bought a regular pizza from a local place, and drove to Mary's apartment. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs with the pizza box in hand, feeling more nervous than he ever had before any business meeting. He knocked on the door, footsteps on the other side, a pause, then Mary's voice. "Who is it?" "It's me, Peter." Silence. Then the sound of the lock turning. Mary opened the door wearing an old sweatshirt and pajama pants, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. She was barefoot and looked like she had been crying, although Peter couldn't be sure. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They stood there looking at each other for a moment. "Did you bring pizza or just yourself?" Mary finally asked. "Both," Peter replied, "but only one's worth it." Despite everything, Mary almost smiled. "Is it pepperoni?" "With stuffed crust." Mary sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in, but only because I'm hungry and there's nothing to eat at home." Peter stepped into Mary's small apartment for the first time. It was exactly as he had imagined. Tiny but cozy, filled with books, plants, and items that clearly had stories and meaning behind them. "Mary," he said, setting the pizza down on the coffee table. "What did I do? At dinner, I mean. What did I do wrong?" Mary sat on the couch, hugging her legs. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said, but her voice sounded tired. "That's the problem." Peter sat at the other end of the couch, keeping some distance. "I don't understand." "Peter," Mary looked him straight in the eye. "I heard Catherine Montgomery call our relationship a charity project. She said you have a habit of, what was it? Social experiments." Peter felt anger rising in his chest. "She said that?" "She did. And you know what's worse?" Mary let out a humorless laugh. "For a second, I wondered if she was right, if I was just another one of your charity cases. Mary, you know that's not true." "Do I?" she asked, staring at him. "Because from where I stand, it feels like you're trying to fit me into a world I don't belong in. And everyone in that world has made it pretty clear they agree with me." Peter moved a little closer on the couch. "I don't care what they think, but you should," Mary said softly. "Because that's your world, Peter. It's where you live, where you work, where you're raising Josh. And if I don't fit in there..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Peter understood exactly what she was saying, and for the first time, he wondered if there was something deeply wrong with a world where someone like Mary wasn't welcome. Peter and Mary sat in silence on her couch for several minutes, the pizza growing cold on the table between them. The small apartment felt even smaller under the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. "Mary?" Peter finally said, his voice lower than usual. "Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone?" Mary watched him closely, noticing the change in his tone. There was a vulnerability there she had never seen before. "Of course." Peter leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees and looking down at his hands. "When Josh was 4, Sarah, my wife, had a car accident." He paused as if he needed to gather strength to go on. "She was coming back from the neurologist's office, where she took Josh for his therapy sessions." Mary said nothing. She just waited. It was a Tuesday in March. I was in a meeting, a big merger I'd been working on for months. Peter shook his head. "Sarah called me that morning and said Josh had a panic attack at school and she had to pick him up. She wanted me to come with her to the doctor's office." Peter stopped again, and Mary could see his hands trembling slightly. "I told her I couldn't, that the meeting was too important, that there was too much money on the line. I told her she could handle it on her own, like she always did. His voice became rougher. Sarah said Josh was asking for me, that he needed me there. And I told her Josh would be fine, that he wouldn't even notice I wasn't there. Mary felt her heart tighten, but stayed quiet. Sarah hung up. We didn't fight. She just hung up. Peter looked up at Mary. 3 hours later, I got a call from the hospital. Her car had skidded on a wet curve. The impact was instant. Peter? But that's not all, he went on, like he needed to say everything at once or he wouldn't be able to finish. When I got to the hospital, Josh was still in the back seat. He was okay physically, but Peter swallowed hard. He stayed in that car with Sarah's body in the front seat for 6 hours. 6 hours until someone found them. Mary brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. Josh didn't speak for 2 months after that. He wouldn't eat, barely slept, didn't respond to anything. The doctor said it was trauma. Peter looked straight at Mary, and I knew it was my fault. If I had gone with them, if I had been in the car, maybe. Peter? No, Mary interrupted gently. You can't know that. But I do, he said firmly, because Sarah always drove slower when I was in the car. She said I made her nervous when she went too fast. If I had been there, she would have driven slower, would have stopped at the first sign of wet roads, would have... His voice broke. Mary moved a little closer on the couch, but didn't touch him yet. What did Josh say when he started talking again? Peter gave a sad smile. The first thing he asked was, "Where's Mom?" And when I explained she was gone and wouldn't be coming back, he said, "Why didn't you go with her?" Peter closed his eyes. I didn't know what to say. And you've carried that guilt ever since, every single day. Peter finally looked at Mary. I shut down after that. I stopped caring about anything that wasn't work or Josh. I stopped trusting my judgment about relationships, about what really matters, because clearly I failed when it mattered the most. Mary stayed quiet for a long moment, taking it all in. That's why you're afraid, she said finally. It's not fear of loving again. It's fear of failing again. Peter nodded. And when I met you, he hesitated. For the first time in 5 years, I wanted something more than work and responsibility. I wanted you. I wanted you to be part of our lives. But you don't know how to do that without the risk of hurting the people you love. Exactly. Peter turned to face her completely. And tonight, when I saw how you felt at that dinner, how they made you feel, I realized maybe I'm already failing again. Maybe I'm trying to push you into a world that's just going to hurt you. Mary studied him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Peter, listen to me. You don't need someone to fix this. She gestured vaguely, referring to the burden he carried. You don't need someone to make you forget Sarah or erase your guilt. Peter frowned, confused. And what do I need? You need someone who's willing to stay while you learn to live with it. Mary moved closer and finally touched his hand. You need someone who understands that you're going to have bad days, but sometimes you'll make choices out of fear instead of reason. Someone who knows you're not perfect, but sees that you're trying. Peter looked at her like he was seeing something impossible. And you? You'd be that person? Mary smiled, and for the first time since that disastrous dinner, it was a real smile. Peter, I gave up a career at MIT to care for my mother for 4 years. I know what it's like to carry weight. I know what it's like to make sacrifices others don't understand. She squeezed his hand. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here because, even with all your baggage, even with all your fears, you make me want to try. Peter felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd carried for so long, he'd forgotten what it was like to breathe without it. Mary? And about that world full of Catherine Montgomerys? Mary shrugged. They can think whatever they want. I don't need their approval to know how I feel about you and Josh. Peter pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. I don't know how to do this right, he murmured. No one does, Mary answered, holding him back. We figure it out as we go. They stayed like that for several minutes, just holding on to each other. And for the first time in 5 years, Peter allowed himself to believe that maybe it was possible to love again, without losing everything. What they didn't know was that Josh had gotten home 10 minutes earlier and was standing at the apartment door, listening through the thin wood. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but he'd come upstairs when he saw his dad's car parked in front of Mary's building. Josh quietly walked back down the steps and sat on the front stoop, trying to process what he'd just heard. For the first time, he understood why his dad always seemed to carry something heavy, why Peter sometimes looked at him with that sad expression he always pretended not to notice. But Josh had heard something else too. Mary saying she would stay. Mary saying she didn't need anyone's approval to care about them. The next morning, Peter found Josh in the kitchen, hard at work on something at the island. Morning, champ. What are you working on? Josh looked up, and Peter noticed a look of determination in his eyes. Something rare, even for Josh. I'm making something for you. Peter walked over and saw that Josh was modifying a Rubik's Cube, adding tiny dots of glow-in-the-dark paint to the inner faces. It's special, Josh explained, continuing his careful work. When you solve it and open it, it'll glow in the dark, and there's something written inside. What does it say? Josh finished applying the paint and gently closed the cube. You have to solve it to find out. Peter took the cube, noticing right away that Josh had adjusted the resistance of the pieces. It turned more smoothly, more easily. It took 15 minutes to solve, and when the last side clicked into place, the cube opened like a small box. Inside, written in small, careful letters that shimmered softly in the morning light, was Mary. Peter looked at Josh, who was watching him closely. Josh, I heard you two talking yesterday, Josh said plainly. I didn't mean to, but I did. Peter felt his stomach drop. Son, about what you heard. It's not your fault, Josh cut in, with the clear, direct logic that was so typical of him. Mom died because of the rain and the curve, not because of you. Peter felt his eyes burn. Josh? And Mary's different, Josh went on. She doesn't pretend I'm normal, but she also doesn't pretend I'm broken. She just accepts me. Josh stepped closer and touched the cube in his dad's hand. Don't lose her, Dad. People like Mary are rare. Peter looked down at the softly glowing cube in his hands, then at his son, so young yet so wise. You're right, he finally said, about everything. Josh smiled, one of those rare smiles that lit up his whole face. I always am. It's statistically proven. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Peter laughed at something from the past without feeling guilty. Maybe, finally, it was time to stop carrying all the weight alone. 2 weeks after that conversation in Mary's apartment, Peter Griffin did something he had never done in all his 42 years. He pushed a grocery cart. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Mary asked, watching Peter study a handwritten list like it was a complex financial report. I have an MBA from Harvard, Peter said, frowning at Josh's handwriting. I think I can figure out a shopping list. Uh-huh. And what does that word say? The one you've been staring at for 5 minutes? Peter tilted the paper sideways. Milk? Or maybe Luke? Josh's handwriting is a little... Mary laughed and leaned in to look. Definitely milk. And that down there says eggs, not UFOs. I was going to say eggs. Peter lied shamelessly. They were at the Whole Foods in Cambridge on a Saturday morning, surrounded by families doing their weekly shopping, young couples picking out ingredients for romantic dinners, and retirees debating cereal brands. Peter felt completely out of his element, but in a strange way, it felt freeing. Okay, next item, Mary said, picking up the list. Ingredients for lasagna that isn't frozen. She looked at him. Josh is very specific. He said he wanted to teach me how to cook something that doesn't come in a box, ready for the microwave. Smart kid. They spent 40 minutes in the store with Mary explaining the difference between ricotta and cottage cheese, helping Peter choose tomatoes that were just right, and teaching him how to check if eggs were cracked. You've never done real grocery shopping before, have you? Mary asked, while Peter examined a head of lettuce like it was a legal document. I have a housekeeper who usually handles this, he admitted, or had. I let her go last week. Mary stopped walking. You let your housekeeper go? Josh said he wanted to learn how to cook with me, and I thought, if we're going to be a real family, maybe it's time to start acting like one. The word family lingered in the air between them. It was the first time Peter had used it so directly, so intentionally. Peter, I know it's too soon to talk about this, he said quickly, but I want you to know that this isn't temporary for me. You're not temporary. Mary smiled and lightly touched his arm. It's not temporary for me either. The following Wednesday, Peter showed up at Josh's school for a parent-teacher meeting, something he usually delegated to his assistant or skipped entirely. The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, looked genuinely surprised to see him. Mr. Griffin, what a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting. Sorry, I've missed the other meetings, Peter said. I want to be more involved in Josh's education. During the meeting, Peter learned things about his son he hadn't known. Josh had started a tutoring program for younger kids struggling with math. He had written a short guide called How to Understand People Who Think Differently for his classmates, and he had asked to do a final project on non-traditional families. Josh is a remarkable child, said Mrs. Henderson. But may I ask, he's been mentioning someone named Mary a lot lately. He says she's teaching him about emotional behavior patterns. Peter smiled. Mary is a very important person in our lives now. I'm glad to hear that. Josh seems more open lately, less anxious. It's obvious something positive is happening at home. On Saturday, Peter tried to make the promised lasagna. Mary had agreed to supervise the process, which basically meant she sat on the kitchen counter making lighthearted comments while Peter did all the work. Okay, next step, Peter said, reading the recipe Josh had printed from the internet. Sauté the onion until translucent. What does that even mean? Onions don't turn into glass. It means soft and golden, Mary explained, swinging her legs from the counter. You'll know it when you see it. That's too vague for someone used to working with spreadsheets. Welcome to cooking, where not everything can be measured in percentages. Josh watched from a nearby stool, offering the occasional technical comment like, the pan should be at about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're stirring at a suboptimal frequency. The lasagna came out slightly burnt around the edges, and the sauce was a little too salty. But when they sat down to eat, Peter felt something he hadn't felt in years, pride in something he had made with his own hands. It's good, Josh said diplomatically. It's great, Mary corrected, for a first try. You're both lying, Peter said, but he was smiling. We are, Mary admitted, but it's a kind lie, and the next one will be better. Next one? Of course. Now you're a man who cooks. There's no going back. The following Thursday, Peter was at the office when Josh called with an unusual urgency in his voice. Dad, I need you to come home now. Josh, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. You need to come and bring Mary. Tell her to come too. Son, I have a meeting. Dad, Josh's voice grew more serious. How many meetings have you had in your life? How many surprises have I ever planned? Peter paused. Josh was right. In 9 years, the boy had never asked for something like this. You're right. I'm coming. Peter called Mary, who was working at the library. Josh wants us both to come home now. He says it's urgent. Is he all right? Seems like it. Just being mysterious. When they got to the apartment, they found Josh wearing an apron. Where had he even gotten an apron? And the dining table set with plates, glasses, and carefully folded napkins. Surprise, Josh said proudly. I planned a dinner. Peter looked around. The table was set for 3. There were candles, fake ones, for safety, in the center, and soft instrumental music was playing in the background. Josh, this is amazing. But what's for dinner? Josh proudly pointed to the kitchen counter, where 3 frozen pizzas were just coming out of the oven. 3 flavor pizza, and I made dessert. The dessert was store-bought cookies, but Josh had arranged them nicely on a plate and written welcome to the family with frosting on paper napkins. Josh, Mary put her hand over her heart. You two always cook together, always do things together. I wanted to do something for you. Josh hesitated, and I wanted you to know I like the way our family is becoming. Peter felt a lump in his throat. Son, I know my mom's not here anymore, Josh continued with his usual honest tone. And I know Mary's not trying to replace her, but it's nice to have someone who gets our jokes and doesn't get awkward when I explain too much. Mary knelt down to be at Josh's eye level. Josh, thank you. This is the most special dinner I've ever had. They ate pizza and cookies, talked about Josh's science project, and laughed when Mary tried to teach Peter how to fold napkins properly. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Peter put on a movie Josh had picked, a science-themed comedy that was more educational than funny, but everyone pretended to love it. Mary, Peter said when Josh went to the bathroom, Would you like to stay the night? Mary looked at him. Peter, are you sure? I am. Not as a guest, as his family. Mary smiled. Yes, I like to stay. When Josh came back, he found Peter and Mary sharing the couch with a clear space saved for him in the middle. Without hesitation, he nestled between them and pulled a blanket over all 3 of them. This movie is statistically inaccurate, Josh mumbled, snuggling against Peter. That's why it's fiction, Mary replied, gently brushing the boy's hair. Can I ask a question? Josh said sleepily. Of course, Peter said. Is Mary going to stay permanently now? Peter and Mary looked at each other over Josh's head. If she wants to, Peter said softly. I do, Mary answered. Josh let out a contented sigh. Well, I already figured out where we'll put her things in the closets, and it would be a waste of logistical planning if she left now. Peter and Mary chuckled quietly, and slowly the 3 of them fell asleep on the couch under the blanket, with the movie still playing on the TV. For the first time in 5 years, Peter fell asleep without checking emails or thinking about the next day's work. For the first time in her adult life, Mary fell asleep feeling completely at home, and Josh fell asleep knowing that his family was finally whole in a way that made sense to him. It wasn't the family he was born into, but it was the family they had chosen to build together. And that, Josh thought, just before falling completely asleep, was statistically much better. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Josh's surprise dinner. Mary was having coffee in Peter's apartment kitchen, something that had become a routine when she saw her name on the thick envelope the doorman had left on the table. My tea? Peter asked, noticing the letterhead as he walked by to grab his briefcase. Mary opened the envelope with trembling fingers. She read in silence, her eyes moving across the lines with an expression that changed with each paragraph. "What is it?" Josh asked, finishing his cereal while reviewing a math project. Mary folded the letter slowly. "It's a job offer." Peter stopped looking for his car keys. "What kind of offer?" Biotech Solutions, a medical robotics company in San Francisco, is offering a re-entry program for engineers who left the field. Mary looked at the letter again as if she couldn't believe what she was reading. They offer 6 months of intensive training, a salary during the program, and then a permanent position developing prosthetics for children. The kitchen went silent. "San Francisco," Peter repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "It's exactly what I've always wanted to do," Mary said, almost in a whisper. "Medical robotics for kids. It's literally my dream." Josh stopped eating and looked between the two adults, his expression suddenly cautious. "Are you going to accept it?" Peter asked. Mary hesitated. "I don't know. I need to think about it." Peter nodded stiffly. Of course, it's a big decision, but Mary could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided looking directly at her. "Peter, I need to get to the office," he said, grabbing his briefcase. "Josh, is Mary taking you to school today?" "Dad," Josh started. "I'll see you tonight." Peter interrupted, quickly kissing Josh's forehead and walking out without looking at Mary. For the next 3 days, the letter stayed on the kitchen table like an unexploded bomb. Peter buried himself in work, leaving early and coming home late. Mary tried to talk to him several times, but he changed the subject or found excuses to leave the room. Josh watched it all with growing anxiety that started to show physically. He went back to spinning his Rubik's Cube obsessively and began listing prime numbers out loud whenever he got nervous. On Friday night, Mary finally confronted Peter when he came home at 10 o'clock. "We need to talk," she said, blocking the kitchen entrance. "About what?" Peter asked, trying to walk past her. "About how you've been avoiding me for 3 days. "I'm not avoiding anyone. I've just been busy." "Peter," Mary crossed her arms. "We promised to be honest with each other." Peter stopped and finally looked at her. There was something wild in his eyes, something Mary recognized as barely hidden panic. "Fine. You want honesty?" he said. "I'm terrified. You've just been given the chance of your dreams, and I know I should be happy for you, but all I can think about is you leaving." "Peter, and maybe that's for the best," he went on, the words pouring out. "Maybe we're just fooling ourselves. You've only just started changing your life, and I've only just started finding myself after being lost for so long. Maybe we're in too different of a place for this to work." Mary stared at him, shocked. "Do you really believe that?" "I don't know what I believe," Peter admitted. "I just know I can't go through this again. I can't let myself need someone and then lose them." "So you're giving up?" Mary asked, her voice rising. "Before we even know if I need to leave, you're already giving up?" "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." "No, you're being a coward." Josh appeared at the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, the Rubik's Cube spinning quickly in his hands. "Stop," he said, his voice tense. "Please stop yelling." Peter and Mary turned to him, instantly ashamed. "Josh, son?" But Josh had started rocking slightly, a sign that his anxiety was climbing dangerously. "You're gonna split up," he said, his voice getting higher. "Mary's gonna leave, and you're gonna be sad again, and everything will go back to how it was before, and I—" Josh stopped talking, but kept rocking, the cube spinning so fast it was making a noise. "Josh," Mary said gently, moving closer. "Breathe with me, okay? Let's breathe together." But Josh was heading into a full-blown anxiety attack. Peter knelt beside him. "Son, it's okay. We're here." "It's not okay," Josh finally burst out. "You're fighting over a letter. A letter. And now Mary's leaving because you're scared. And I'm going to lose her. And I'm going to lose you too because you're going to get sad and distant like you did when Mom died." Josh's words cut through the air like knives. Peter and Mary looked at each other over the boy's head, both seeing clearly how their fight was affecting the child they both loved. "Josh," Mary said softly, sitting on the floor next to him. "Look at me. We're gonna figure this out, okay? I'm not leaving without us talking everything through. You promise?" Josh asked, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I promise." Peter helped Josh calm down, and after 20 minutes, the boy finally agreed to go to bed. Mary and Peter sat quietly in the hallway outside his room until they were sure he was asleep. "We need to talk," Mary whispered. They stepped out onto the apartment balcony where they could talk without waking Josh. "I messed everything up," Peter said right away. Josh was right. "I've been letting fear make all the decisions." Mary leaned on the railing, looking out at the city lights. "Peter, can I ask you something?" "Of course. If I ask you to stay, if I say I'm not going to take the offer, would I be holding you back from flying?" Mary turned to face him. "What? That's the question you should be asking me. If you're staying because of me, because of us, am I holding you back from flying?" Mary studied him for a long moment. "Peter, when I got that letter, the first thing I thought wasn't finally my big break. It was, how am I going to tell Peter and Josh?" She gave a small smile. 6 months ago, that offer would have been the answer to all my prayers. But now I have a family. I have you. I have Josh. I have a life we built together. Mary stepped closer to him. "If I stay, it's not because you asked me to. It's because I'm choosing to stay. Because this life we have is worth more than any dream job." Peter looked at her, barely able to believe what he was hearing. "But it's your chance." "Peter," Mary said, placing her hands on his face. "There are many ways to follow a dream. Maybe I can find a way to work with medical robotics here in Boston. Maybe I can go back to school and still keep the life we have. Maybe my dream has grown to include more than just a career. Mary, you gave me something I never had. A family that chooses me every day. And Josh gave me something I didn't even know I needed. A purpose that's bigger than professional success." She smiled. "I'm not giving that up for a chance that might come again. Maybe even better next time." Peter pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry for doubting us, for letting fear." Mary interrupted. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep choosing each other." They kissed there on the balcony with the lights of Boston stretching below them and the distant sounds of the city night around them. When they pulled apart, Peter smiled. "So, should we call San Francisco tomorrow?" "Let's do it," Mary said. "And then let's look into medical robotics programs in Boston, together." "Together," Peter repeated. And for the first time in days, they both felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. 3 months after the San Francisco offer crisis, life had found a new rhythm. Mary had enrolled in a graduate program in biomedical engineering at Northeastern University and gotten a part-time job at a research lab focused on pediatric prosthetics. Peter had learned how to cook at least 5 meals that didn't come out of a box. And Josh had created a new kitchen organization system based on optimized culinary efficiency. It was a Saturday morning when Josh walked into the room where Peter was reading reports, and Mary was studying at a makeshift desk made of stacked books. "Dad," Josh said, carrying something carefully in his hands. "I'm done." Peter looked up from the papers. "Done with what, buddy?" Josh walked over, holding what looked like a Rubik's Cube, but different from any Peter had ever seen. Instead of the usual colors, each side had tiny hand-drawn illustrations: stars, hearts, gears, books, and little portraits that seemed to represent the three of them as a family. "It's a special cube," Josh explained, handing it to Peter. "There's no traditional solution to it, but it's the prettiest one I've ever made." Peter turned the cube in his hands, admiring the careful detail. Each drawing had been done with fine-tip pens, each part thoughtfully planned. "Josh, this is amazing. But how does it work if there's no real solution?" Josh smiled, one of those knowing smiles that meant he understood something the adults didn't. "There is a solution. It's just not the one you're expecting." He pointed to a small, almost invisible arrow on one of the faces. "Follow the drawings in order. When you get to the end, you'll see." Mary walked over, just as curious. "Can I see it?" Peter showed her the cube, and together they started following the sequence Josh had created. Each turn revealed another part of a story Josh had told through the drawings. Peter alone with Josh, then Mary entering their lives, and then the three of them together, shopping, cooking, laughing. "Josh, this is like a picture book," Mary said, touched. "You drew our story." "It's not finished yet," Josh said, watching closely as Peter and Mary kept going. When they reached the final step in the sequence, something clicked. The cube opened up like a small box, revealing a velvet-lined compartment inside. And tucked in there, Peter stopped breathing. There was a ring. Simple, elegant, with a small but perfect diamond, and beneath it, a folded note. "Josh," Peter started, his voice catching. "Read the note," Josh said, nearly bouncing with excitement. Peter unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Josh's careful handwriting read, "When you're ready to ask the right question to the right person. With love, Josh. P.S. I already checked. She's going to say yes." Mary covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Josh?" "You?" "Dad's been talking about marriage for weeks," Josh said matter-of-factly. He always started the sentence and then stopped. I figured he needed help with logistics. He turned to Peter, "And I wanted you to know I officially approve." Peter looked back and forth between the ring and his son, feeling like his heart could burst from pride and love. "Son, this is... How did you even..." "I asked Aunt Catherine for help," Josh said. "She took me to a store, and I told the guy exactly what I needed. He said it was for a very special occasion, and I told him it was to make my family officially complete." Peter hugged Josh tightly. "You're amazing. You know that?" "Statistically, yes," Josh said with a grin. "So are you going to propose, or do I need to make you a timeline?" Mary laughed through her tears. "I think your dad needs a minute to process." "Actually," Peter said, looking at the ring, then at Mary. "I think I've already processed." He turned to Josh. "Son, can you help me with something?" "Sure. I need to plan something special. Would you wear that suit we got you for Cousin Robert's wedding?" Josh frowned. "Why? Are we going somewhere fancy?" "Something like that," Peter said, giving Mary a wink. "It's a surprise." The next Sunday, Mary received a handwritten invitation in Josh's handwriting to a special backyard picnic, blindfold required to preserve the surprise. When she arrived at Peter's apartment, Josh greeted her at the door, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit and a tie he'd picked out himself, gray with little Rubik's cubes printed on it. "You look very sharp," Mary said, straightening his tie. "It's a special occasion," Josh said solemnly. "Now, I need to put this blindfold on you." "Josh, What are you two planning?" "It's a surprise, but I can give you a hint. It's going to be statistically the best day of our family life." Mary let Josh tie a soft blindfold over her eyes and carefully guide her to the elevator, then through the lobby, and finally to the small backyard behind the building. A place she hadn't even known was there. "Can I take it off now?" she asked. "Wait," Josh said. "Dad, are you ready?" "I'm ready," came Peter's voice from somewhere ahead of her. "Now you can take it off." Mary took off the blindfold and blinked, letting her eyes adjust to the soft evening light. The backyard had been transformed. A checkered blanket was spread out on the grass. Picnic baskets were arranged around it. Small string lights hung from the nearby trees, and Peter was kneeling in the center of it all, holding the ring that Josh had hidden inside the Rubik's Cube. "Mary," Peter said, his voice clear, but full of emotion. "I've spent my whole life trying to control everything, trying to get everything just right. But you taught me that the best things in life happen when we stop trying to control everything and just start living." Mary brought her hands to her chest, tears already running down her face. "I want to overcook pasta with you," Peter continued. "I want to order the wrong meals at fancy restaurants. I want days that make no sense at all, but still feel right because they're with you. I want to build a messy, perfect, completely ours kind of family." He held up the ring. "Mary Collins, will you marry me? Will you marry us?" Mary looked at Peter down on one knee in the grass, then over at Josh, who was practically bouncing with excitement, and then back at Peter. Instead of answering with words, she leaned down and kissed Peter a long, sweet kiss, full of promise. When they pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, "Then, let's solve this cube our own way." Josh let out a shout of joy that was probably heard 3 blocks away. "That means yes," he yelled. "I knew it. The odds were totally in our favor." Peter slipped the ring onto Mary's finger, and the 3 of them hugged right there on the grass, laughing and crying all at once. 6 months later, on a rainy Wednesday night, the 3 of them were sitting on the couch watching cartoons. Mary was wearing one of Peter's old t-shirts and mismatched socks. Peter was in sweatpants with tomato sauce stains on his shirt because they had tried and spectacularly failed to make homemade pizza. Josh was in his pajamas, covered in little planets nestled between them. On the TV, a silly cartoon about talking animals was playing, and Josh was seriously explaining why the physics in the episode made no sense. "Turtles can't run at 60 miles per hour, he said seriously. "It's biologically impossible. The structure of their shell wouldn't allow." "Josh," Mary interrupted, laughing. "It's a cartoon. You can ease up on the science, but factual accuracy is still important, even in fiction." Peter watched them, his wife patiently explaining to their son why cartoons didn't have to follow the laws of physics. All 3 of them tucked under a blanket up to their noses, popcorn spilled on the couch, the apartment messy but full of life. It wasn't the life he had planned. It wasn't the perfect movie family dream. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. It was whole. And when Josh finally stopped analyzing turtle biomechanics and snuggled between them with a content sigh, Peter thought maybe this was the real definition of happiness. Not perfect moments, but perfectly imperfect ones, shared with the right people. Mary reached over Josh's head and gently squeezed Peter's hand. 3 squeezes, the code they'd come up with for "I love you." Peter squeezed back. 3 squeezes. And Josh, without opening his eyes, murmured sleepily, "You know I can feel it when you do that, right? Statistically speaking, it's impossible to hide signs of affection from someone who's physically between you." They chuckled softly, and outside the rain kept falling, making the apartment feel even cozier. Simple. real, complete. What did you think of Mary and Peter's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you won't miss any of our stories. And check out more touching stories by clicking right here on the final screen.